ahead and start filming. For the chapter 3, why don't we start with the terms, and then I'll start running through some of these articles. We'll probably go for about an hour, and there's a lot of stuff we can cover in this hour. So, are there any questions that y'all have in reference to chapter 3, any of the terms? The first one, political science.
Actually, I was wondering about that too, because I forgot the exact nuance of it.
Okay, the thing I had told you from day one, political science, the study of political and government institutions and processes. So basically, the study of government institutions and processes. Institutions, if you remember, I said things like a legislature or an executive or a dictator. Processes would be things like elections or votes to pass a law, things like this. Politics, politicians, polity, and political science are all basically straight definition terms. And that should be fairly straightforward. The one that we focused on the most that first day, you remember, was politicians, and that was the process by which people determine who shall govern and the policies that they adopt. And actually, if you remember, that's where we started getting into the articles, because the articles all kind of demonstrated examples of politics. And I had given you the one dealing with Pakistan and the hudud laws, and that was the one talking about the need of the male witnesses in order to gain a rape conviction. I had given y'all the Islamic retribution one.
That was fun.
And the Islamic retribution one, the one being where the guy threw the acid on the woman, and then ultimately the punishment. And I think it's not clear in the article. What do you remember about Islamic retribution? What was the story? Go ahead.
It was based on the whole idea of an eye for an eye, and because she was a woman, that she couldn't exactly do exact justice on him. They would have like a couple drops in one of his eyes or something like that.
Okay, well, what was the story? So if you were going to write this as a short answer, tell me the story. Go ahead, Julie. Why don't you start?
Okay, the story was this woman didn't want to marry this man, and he kept asking her, and she
Country?
in Pakistan.
Iran?
Iran.
Yeah, thank you, Iran. Go ahead.
Sorry. And she kept saying no, 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 and then he was like, well, if I can't have her, no one can. So he threw acid on her face.
Okay.
And this, ruined her whole life. It ruined her face. She was a photographer.
Deformed her, blind her.
So she could no longer do her profession.
And the picture, I believe, that I had put online suggested that she was a fairly attractive young lady. Mm-hmm. So at 20-something years old, basically, her life is going to be completely different.
Right.
What did she want? What ultimately did the courts or the legal system suggest?
She wanted to do an eye for an eye. He put acid on my face. I want to dump acid on his face.
Okay.
The courts originally said, yes, that's your right, but then went back and said, no, 2 women's eyes is not worth the same as 2 male eyes.
Right.
So you can put 12 drops of acid in one of his eyes.
Yeah.
And he'd be getting an anesthetic so that he wouldn't feel the pain.
Yeah, so basically, now how is this different than what would typically happen in a case like this, say in someplace like Iran?
Typically, the woman wouldn't win at all.
Typically, the woman would not win at all. Absolutely. So these first couple, the Pakistan one, absolutely a women's rights article. The Islamic retribution one, absolutely a women's rights article. I know these have all been up there for a while. We talked about Yemen and the child brides, too. And if you remember with Yemen and the child brides, take a good look at that one, because you'll notice, I said today in class, there are going to be some themes that you'll see in the articles. And really one of the first themes that we had was really the women's rights type issue, and the Yemen bride one kind of falls in exactly with this one as well. So when you look at these, be thinking about those in that regard. Am I going to ask you a lot of specifics? How old was the woman in Islamic retribution? No, I'm not going to do that. But as long as you can explain the story or the custom or the controversy behind the articles, and we did spend good time on each of these 3 at the beginning, you should be fine with that.
I don't remember the Yemen, though. I didn't write that down.
Okay, Yemen was the one. Yemen confronts plight of child brides.
Oh, now I remember.
Yemen confronts the plight of child brides. This was the one, looking back on this, that was talking about the little girls that were getting basically forced to be married. The law would not allow them to be divorced, and they were getting married sometimes at 9, 10, 11, 12 years old to, say, somebody that was my age. And it was accepted in the custom, and they were also kind of, what were they doing? What were the families doing?
The families were gaining the dowry from...
Families were basically selling the little girls. So the little girls, what was the benefit to them in this arrangement?
That they would have a new husband that could hopefully provide for them, keep them fed, keep
And
them
then-
medically safe, and they would be supporting their family.
Absolutely. So it was kind of a double thing on this. One, they were being benefited by, they were being basically sold to a man that was going to be able to take care of them. But two, they were going to be able to pull their weight to kind of provide for the family. But it wasn't always working out the way that they wanted, if you remember with this one. These were some of the politics issues that I believe that we had talked about. Now, then we began to turn a little bit. And there was the article about abortion. And we had some medical articles that kind of came up. And there was some overlap between the medical articles and the women's rights articles. Do you remember the one about the abortion? What were they doing and where were they doing it in reference to? Go ahead, Andrew.
Was that the one where they said that you can only abort the baby if it was a certain gender? Or
Did it
You don't have to.
Did it say that you could only abort if it was a certain gender, or is there a better way of saying it? Not everybody at once.
No, I don't remember.
Go ahead.
Wasn't it Japan people aborting girls?
Where?
US or
In the U.S. That's what it was. It was talking about how certain cultures, and it was talking more specifically about some of the Asian ones, how they, in their countries, get abortions specifically because the child is female. Well, the thing of it was that, everybody in class, if you remember, started raising a stink. Oh my gosh, how can you just abort somebody because they're female? And then as we went through the article a little further, we found out that this was what the policy was, and it was perfectly legal to do this in the United States. So this kind of gets into some of the medical issue. This also gets into a little bit of a women's rights issue as well. So kind of keep this in mind. The cancer one, Ben, you were talking about that. What was the cancer one?
It was about how a child had cancer and he was getting, I believe he was getting treatment, chemo and radiation, and I can't remember exactly, for some reason, I don't think it was working, and the mom wanted to take him off it and do alternatives.
Native American healing, I believe is what it was.
And then I think it was Minnesota, I believe.
It was Minnesota.
And they said you can't do that because we, the state, have a right to look out for the general welfare of children of our state.
Okay, so basically the parent was saying, I got this teenager, 13-year-old little boy, that wants to, or actually that has lymphoma, form of cancer.
Right.
Okay, question was, can the state force the child to get medical care? Can the state force the parents to make the child get medical care, or can the parents raise the child as they see fit?